Greetings, greetings and welcome. This is Miracles with a Twist. I'm Lori Cardona. This is January 29th, and regardless of when you hear it or watch it, we are looking at a 3-week delay since the last time I did a podcast in which I said I was going to be creating lots of content, and then I didn't. And in all honesty, it's because between then and now, things seem to have gotten worse instead of better in our world, in our country, in our internal response to what's going on. A lot of people feeling a sense of helplessness. And so I wanted to say something that seemed helpful and hopeful, and yet I didn't want it to sound like spiritual bypassing or dismissive. And yeah, I've been a minister for 25 years, and for 25 years, I've avoided making political commentary. In fact, when we did live streams here at the house, that was my one and only rule. You can go in the refrigerator and help yourself to anything. You can hang out as long as you want, but we were not to talk politics. So why now? Now I will be making a few statements just simply because I think it is incumbent on all of us, and it's a place where most of us feel a need to take some responsibility for providing advice and direction. And while I don't have all the answers, I do know that there are things we can do, there are places we can turn to, such as I wrote some down. I wanted to talk to you about some options, and I'll leave them in the comments for you to refer back to if you would like. So certain independent news sources. Now, if you don't agree with any of this, it's because we may be on different sides of the aisle, and that, that's really up to you. So there are many independent news sources right now. They are not in TV news or cable news. They're mostly YouTube, Facebook, independent sources that at this point have not been shut down and cannot be shut down, and hopefully will never be shut down. So there are some commentators like Brian Tyler Cohen, Heather Cox Richardson. The ACLU has a station and a YouTube and also a website. There's also, before you go shopping, you can just Google the DEI policy of a particular store before you go in person or online. And we can look in terms of what some small grassroots groups are doing, and also to be able to be helpful in the moment, and by that I don't mean putting yourself in harm's way, but to be as helpful as you can, perhaps just to another person, to perhaps to a group of people, to volunteer. There are things that you can do in your community. There's an app called Five Calls. This app is very helpful. It gives you the name of your senator, it gives you a phone number, it gives you a script, and it gives you options of different concerns that you can click on and find out what the script, the senator, the call, all of that, what all of that would be for you to follow up on. So those are things we can do. And sometimes it's just something so simple, can be just to be present to someone in need. I told you the story a long time ago, but it just came to me as a reminder. I was in a hospital waiting room. I was doing chaplaincy work, and I was waiting for someone to have a meeting. And there was a doctor who came through and didn't want to stop to show his ID. So the young lady behind the counter was saying, "No, no, you can't go through. I need you to show your ID." And he started yelling at her, and he was saying, "I'm a doctor. How dare you?" And he really just went on in his reprimanding. And I just got up and stood next to her, and I said, "Why don't you call the head of security?" And I didn't argue with him because I knew that would just escalate the issue, but I wanted to be present to her. So without engaging with his anger, without trying to match his anger, without trying to outshout him, I just stayed a quiet presence to her, just so that she knew she wasn't alone. She called the head of security. The guy went off anyway. He went walking in without showing his identification, but then he did come back, continued yelling at her. But at that point, the head of security was there, and they went out and had a heart-to-heart conversation. So something so simple is a way to let people know that you are present to them, people who may be afraid in the moment. The other day I was at an event in Hollywood here in Florida, and it was really nice. There was a band shell where there was people singing, and some of us were sitting in this area where there was a wall you can sit on. There was grass, and behind us there was an event, and some armed officers came in, and my first thought was, what do we do? Is that ice? Do we get up? What do we rally? What happens next? And this guy said, no, 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 they're here for us. They're here to, they're here to make sure that everything's going to be okay, that there's, it's a big crowd. We want to make sure everybody's safe. I was like, oh, but this is where we are now in our lives, that we have this knee-jerk reaction to thinking that something bad is going to happen as opposed to, oh, somebody's here to do something good. So we want to be aware of that. We want to be present to that, and yet we also don't want to engage in a way that we become that which we are upset about. We don't want to become so angry, so upset that we completely forget that there is another way that we need to be so that we can show up when we're needed, so that we can continue to be those who want to be a helpful, hopeful voice and a helpful presence. I was thinking about this conversation I saw in a documentary between Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, and they both come from horrific experiences, and they were talking about the challenge of maintaining focus, but it is a dedication, is a relentless dedication, as we spoke about in the previous podcast. And it reminds me that we have this other beautiful example of maintaining peace and composure with the 19 monks who are walking across the country. And they stopped for an interview to say that they are also receiving a lot of pushback. They're even though they have thousands of people, I mean, they're gaining thousands everywhere they go. There's more and more thousands of people who are following them, who are grateful to them, who are receiving the energy and the message of their love and their light and their desire for peace. There are also people who are pushing against them, stopping them to tell them that they're going to burn in hell, and some unkind things. Also, there are people, they say, who stop their cars and push on the gas so that this black smoke comes over them. And I understand that that happens to protesters as well, in peaceful protesters in certain areas, even here in Florida during the No Kings marches. Anyway, so the things that I mentioned that you can do, and the resources you can look at, I will drop in the comment to give you an opportunity to refer back. But I also want to remind us all that while all of that is happening and while we're thinking about who we can be, we also want to maintain and continue our spiritual practices and to continue integrating the belief in rising higher, in loving steadily, forgiving readily as best we can, not to get too sidetracked away from that. I had this interesting example of the ways in which we can forget everything, which was, there was a video this guy took, or I don't know if it was a man, somebody took a video because they went to pull into a parking space on their way to yoga class, and there was a woman sitting in the spot on her yoga mat, and they said, "What are you doing?" And she said she was saving that space for someone else. And so they kind of got into a little bit of an argument as to whether or not that's how you save a space. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong here. I'm just saying that what happened was she sat there, she turned her head, and she gave them the finger. And the whole time they were talking, she was sitting there with her finger extended, and we all know what that means. It wasn't the good finger. And it and her shirt said, "Live United." And I thought, what? Like, are we going to go to yoga classes and bow in our namaste and, talk about all the things we know, and yet raise our middle finger, the not good finger, to other people, and engage in battle? It's a contradiction. We want to be aware of that. We want to keep an eye on ourselves. We want to be hyper vigilant to ourselves so that we don't fall into that contradictory way of being. That on the one hand, we want to say all the right things, but inside we're brewing with the, just waiting for this opportunity to raise that middle finger, whether figuratively or accurately, or actually, or even verbally. So um, we have resources, we have ways of being, while at the same time we can maintain our spiritual practice. In A Course in Miracles, it tells us in lesson 185, and I know I've referred to this often, it says, I want the peace of God. To say these words is nothing, but to mean these words is everything. To mean these words is everything. And in lesson 47, it says, there is a place in you where there is perfect peace. There is a place in you where nothing is impossible. And if we can default to that thinking, as opposed to the middle finger thinking, then it will give us the strength and the ability to show up when we are needed, where we are needed. And that's what we need more of. That's what we can do. If it's all we can do, we can continue to be that example. I have some notes here. I wanted to make sure I gave you the examples of the places you can go, the things you can do. I mean, I know it can be so, it can be so exhausting. There's a woman I started following on, I think, I don't know, Facebook or Instagram, because of her vegan recipes. She calls herself the Korean vegan, but she has started doing political commentary. And one of the things she did was she made a correlation between a 26-mile marathon. And she talked about the fact that she ran a marathon. And at the 18th mile, there's this 18th mile phenomena where it feels as though everything is shutting down, where it feels like the level of exhaustion is beyond anything you can possibly endure. She says your entire body hurts and your emotions start to play tricks on you and your mind starts to play tricks on you and you start thinking, I can't do it. I can't do it. But then you think about everything you've done to get to that, and you go those next 8 miles to get to the 26 miles. And that's where you feel the relief and the joy of accomplishment. And she made that correlation to our dedication to maintaining our dedication to getting through these difficult times as best we can with all the resources we have. And it's also true of our spiritual dedication, because it can be so exhausting at times to maintain the higher view, the view from above, as A Course in Miracles talks about, the view from above the battle. There's a song that they sing in some of the New Thought churches that says, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. And as many of you know, I have alarms on my phone that go off like 10 times a day. And they have different quotes from A Course in Miracles. And they just give me pause. It's just time for me to pause and take a breath and be reflective. Where's my mind? Where are my thoughts? What am I doing right now? But at 12 o'clock and 5 o'clock, I've made a commitment to a WhatsApp group that I belong to, Women Embracing Spirit, a group of spiritually dedicated women, that at 12 o'clock and at 5 o'clock, we pray with each other. And it can be very simple. When the alarm goes off, that's what I say. I say, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Because if it doesn't begin with me, then I'm just a part of the opposition. I'm a part of that other side. I'm a part of the bullying and the abuse. I heard this morning that there was a new bill. I don't know if it's possible to pass this bill, but it's that there is a desire from a certain contingency to have the right to deport American citizens. And I thought, where are we going? Where are you going to deport us to if we were born here? And so I just want to say, for the record, if I get deported for any reason, I just hope it's to someplace nice. I hope it's to someplace where people are filled with love and who walk the talk, who live their principles, and are dedicated to rising higher, to love, to compassion, to kindness, And if there's a place like that that I can be deported to, then let's all go there. Let's all live there. And in the meantime, let's be that here. There's I mentioned this book last time, the Namas and the Yamas and the Niyamas. And there's a quote in this book that's from someone by the name of Eddie Helsman. Some of you might know this person, a young Holocaust survivor. Oh, well, of course, would be elderly now. But the quote says, ultimately, we have just one moral duty to reclaim large areas of peace in ourselves. And that's exactly what these quotes from A Course in Miracles were telling us too. I want the peace of God, but I have to mean it. If I want deep peace, what if you want to call it the peace of love, the peace of life, this deep peace, if you want deep peace, the peace that we are guaranteed is deep within us. It's actually deep within everyone. It's just who wants it, who doesn't. Some people choose violence. And we see those people now. We see that they're choosing violence. But we choose peace. We choose peace. And we choose the ways to get there so that it's not just talking about it. It's not just saying it. It's doing it, being it. There's a chant that I heard some of the people in Minneapolis in quiet morning. It says, hold on, my dear ones, here comes the dawn. And it might sound very cliche, but it is always darkest before dawn. But hold on, here comes the dawn. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. If you happen to be watching or listening on before the first week of February, I will be hosting the next full moon gathering on the beach on Monday, February 2nd, Lauderdale by the Sea. And I will be focusing on peace songs, peace chants, and peace prayers. If you can be there, that'd be great. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me.